All right, I believe this means we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sorts and sizes and persuasions, welcome to another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, aka Some Gadget Guy, the SGG of this terribly named podcast series. Absolutely the worst name that you could call a podcast, but the QA part of this title is the important part because what we want to do is have kind of an interactive conversation about some of the top tech stories of the last week. It's why I hold my show on a Monday. We can kind of sort out our feelings on the news, and we've got a lot of news and a lot of feels that we're gonna have to sort out this week. This week's episode is feeling a little heavy. I'm gonna try and keep it light. We've got some pretty we've got some pretty heavy stuff to talk about this week. I'm already seeing a few folks in the chat. Simon says Hypno, Dave Burns, Paul Purry. Dave is saying somebody got a haircut. Somebody got them all cut. Eh? I love that dad joke. And Aditya Anil is joining the fun as well. This week's show is going to sound a little different. I've been having some issues with my audio interface. If you've been on the Patreon and you've been keeping up with my audio reviews, you might remember a little bit more than a year back, my Focusrite totally died. I mean, it was recording audio, but it was adding all of this noise and distortion and these almost perfectly regular tick sounds. Like the internal clock was making its own noise. And so I tried to get it exchanged. Focusrite's support is not very good. And they sort of contract out to a third party supplier. It never really worked out, that Focusrite unit and getting it exchanged. I ended up with a unit that was a much poorer performer than what I originally had before it died. And so I ended up getting another Focusrite just in the immediacy of needing to stay on my workflow and get projects done. Well, that Focusrite unit is just a little over a year old, and it was great until very recently when it wasn't. One of the channels started doing this extreme bass roll off and this weird peaking, and as I was trying to record videos, I was constantly like switching inputs so that I could get on the better input. And when you try to measure the output of really fancy, headphone jacks and adapters and DACs, and one of your inputs is grossly non-functional, it makes that job very difficult to more analytically measure this stuff. So I started the process of getting that unit exchanged July 23rd. July 22nd, somewhere in there, was the first message that I sent to Focusrite. And I finally got an approval for an RMA last Friday. And now it's still probably going to take another like 7 to 10 business days to get me a replacement unit, even though I'm well under warranty. And they can't do any type of like co-exchange, or they can't send a unit out ahead of the RMA. And if you need another unit while you're waiting for the replacement, maybe you could just buy another one and then return it. So you could just return the used unit if you need some kind of carryover. So this week's show is brought to you by the Rode Wireless Go 2. Suffice it to say, I'm getting this Focusrite exchanged, but I'm very aggressively examining my options for any other type of audio interface. I'm going to stop recommending Focusrite for anyone other than just kind of casual hobbyists. As much as I really do like their gear, and the new preamps on the third gen Focusrites are surprisingly good. I can't handle this kind of support. It's taking weeks. I mean, again, this is days and business days, and I can only get replies on business days. And I got that BS like, hey, I'm trying to reach someone on the support side, but no one's replying to my emails. Oh, the person who's handling your support ticket is out of the office. And they didn't forward any of their stuff to anyone else. I feel like that's the incorrect way to handle support. You know, again, you're just sort of left out in the cold if you have any issues with their products. And if you're kind of a gigging musician or recording engineer, or you're trying to get work done, Focusrite solution is apparently just buy a whole bunch of gear that you don't really need, because we're not going to help you if any of that gear goes bad, and you'll just want to have an extra audio interface lying around. So yeah, not great. All right. Oh, we got a bunch of people in the chat. Everyone jumping in right now. Let's see. We've got, like I said, Gabaletta. We've got Heiki. We've got Tree of Palms. I miss it. Gary the Fireman. Paul Purry. Hashtag is this video sponsored. Ranesh. The flip side of that equation. Hold on. Let me tell you like the difference in support. So I'm wearing my little Rode Wireless Go 2. Okay, so I just complained about Focusrite. I'm going to be switching to another audio interface. I'm talking to the guys at Apogee, like maybe I can get some kind of deal or pricing on one of their audio interfaces. It's more money than I want to spend, but they make pretty nice gear. I've been using the Rode Wireless Go with these little magnet adapters. So you can see, like, I just stick them to my shirt. I'm kind of over trying to use like button-up shirts so I can clip a lav. And when you clip a lav to a t-shirt, it puts it like right up under your voice box. And audio can get super muddy if you're trying to capture the human voice. It's less than ideal. And I've messed with some others, like maybe if I get a magnet adapter, I can move the lav to like the middle of my chest, but then you've got like this cable that's sticking out, or just looks untidy. Again, first world problems, YouTuber problems. But Rode makes these magnetic adapters so you can stick the entire Rode Wireless Go kind of Star Trek communicator badge style, and that's nerdy. I like it. I think it's distracting in the best way possible. You know exactly what I'm using to get my audio recorded, and again, it's everything I can do to not like tap the badge and act like I'm you know, trying to do intership communications on the Starship Enterprise. Those magnets are incredibly strong. And I just have a little pouch that I keep my Rode Wireless Go in when I'm not using them. So I put them in the pouch and I'm traveling. This was during the road trip. They snapped together. And they snapped together with such force that they cracked one of the magnets. So I'm only using one at a time. Thankfully, you know, in me taking my entire little Rode Wireless Go kit, I still had a mic. It was fine. And I probably could have used it snapped, you know, like just taking both parts of the magnet and trying to like stick them together under my shirt. It's a cracked edge. It would have been uncomfortable to wear it like that. So after the road trip, I reached out to the folks at Rode and just said, hey, you know, I know this is probably accidental damage, but this is, you know, this is what happened, and I'm using the little pouch that you gave me. Nothing else comes with the magnetic adapters to try and protect them or store them. Do you have any tips on how to not let this happen again, or should I really just buy like a hard case where all of the Rode Wireless Go mics are stored more separately? They never really addressed the question. They just sent out a replacement magnet. They're like, oh, we're so sorry that happened to you. Yeah, the magnets are really strong. Try not to let them stick together again. But let me get your shipping address. And 3 days later, I had a magnet replacement. Now, we're talking about like a $30 magnet versus a $300 audio interface. But like sight unseen, no RMA process, no jumping through hoops. Just, hey, yeah, that product can get kind of weird like that. Try not to let it happen again. Here's another one. And like, that's that kind of stuff that makes me crazy, when the more expensive gadgets and products in sort of an audio lineup should probably be treated more like that. And the cheaper ones should be more like, oh yeah, that's a bummer. You'll just have to buy another one. So yeah, Simon says, Hypno, customer support. Yeah, it really matters. It makes me super cranky. I'm like putting together in my head a buy Felicia video for Focusrite. And it makes me sad because Focusrite was one of those companies that I heavily endorsed and recommended when I was doing a lot of home recording consulting, when I was working with voice actors to just try and get something that was up to speed for a home recording setup. And now I've got to say, if you're relying on that gear to like get auditions done or to kind of move your business along, they're not the company you want to have to work with. So, the other exciting news this weekend, my daughter lost her first tooth. My daughter has this cute little gap in her mouth right now. And I just had to put that out there as like the proud papa. We were, it was getting really loose. The root had probably already kind of pulled out of it, but this is the very first one. And this is our only daughter. So we had no idea what to expect. And last night, my wife gets in there, and we try, like, every couple of days we really try and get in and do some like hard flossing. And she's like, okay, I'm not going to do the thing where I like tie the floss to a door and slam the door, but let's just try and wrap it around the tooth and see if we can really wiggle it really hard. My daughter gets really nervous, and we put the little loop around her tooth, and just as we do, she twitches and she backs up, and it pops right out, and it's all three of us just kind of staring at each other for a good minute that just happened. And now there's a gap, and of course, it fills up with like a little bit of gore. There's like a little bit of blood, and so my daughter goes running off to the bathroom, and we get like a really, really watered down mouthwash, and we help her swish and stuff. But the tooth fairy came last night. Apparently, a first tooth is now going for like 5 or 10 or something like that. So my daughter now has some spending cash. Apparently, inflation has also hit the tooth fairy business as well. So Dave Burns, 600 big ones. My daughter will be buying her own laptop. Yeah, absolutely. Tooth Fairy made it in. Tooth Fairy wrote this really adorable poem. Like something about like a first tooth is really precious and how she's going to cherish it and stuff. So I think the Tooth Fairy did pretty well. Raymond at 10 cents a tooth. I'm trying to remember. I really feel like when I was a kid, I think my very first tooth was like 50 cents. And then I think I started getting $1 a tooth towards the end, which is kind of the reverse of how a lot of Tooth Fairy, how a lot of Tooth Fairy business seems to be conducted. Excuse me. All right. Barry Johnson's in stealth mode. I love it. Apparently he's got meetings and stuff, but he's still in here. He's still tackling this. I dig it. Yes. So it was a wonderful and eventful weekend, and so it was in the world of technology as we got through the last kind of week of tech. We've got some politics that we need to cover, some FCC news. For the news block for the first half, we're going to talk about Apple. I mean, there's no way around it. This is going to be one of the biggest conversations in tech. But then for the second half, and again, if there's a pitch you guys have live, I mean, I put it out there on Twitter, but no one ever really seems to take me up on this. If there's fun news that you'd like to cover too, drop it in the comments as we're getting through some of this conversation. Because like I said, I don't know how to make this show not as heavy as it might otherwise be. So, excuse me. I'm gonna have to start like muting because I can't turn away from the microphone when I have to cough, and my voice is still super flaky. Oh, David. I suggest stories all the time. I feel like I deserve a week off. Everyone give some kind of pouty face emoticon or emoji to David. Because we all are, it's very precious how David is feeling. So, oh, TED Talks Tech. Can you say if you have the Xperia 5 Mark III? I do not have the Xperia 5 Mark III. So as we can always tell from Sony Stage's regional launches, let me just be upfront. We still don't have shipping confirmation for Xperia 1 Mark IIIs in North America. There is some likelihood that the pre-orders are being fulfilled in such small batches that even if you pre-ordered on the day you were one of the first in line, that stock is going to take time to replenish, and your pre-order is going to get pushed later and later into September. Sony sells their phones where they make the most money first, and they fulfill demand where the demand is the strongest. And so we were months behind China in any kind of hands-on or coverage capacity. It seems to me like the 5 Mark III is one of those crown jewel phones for the EU. It's not as expensive as the 1 Mark III. It's feature complete and competitive against other sort of Galaxy S21 series phones. It's unique, but still gives off that high luxury vibe. And people are more willing to buy their phones outright. So the United States market heavily depends on subsidizing your phone prices or getting some kind of no interest loan to lease your phone. And Sony doesn't play that game, so something tells me as the 5 Mark III rolls out, Sony is going to be sending units to people in very limited quantities to very specific regions. And the 5 Mark III looks like a perfect EU kind of phone. And then, I don't know, I'm expecting maybe closer to Thanksgiving, we'll start getting them here in the United States. It was a conversation that TK and I actually had with Sony PR about, hey, you're wanting this coverage and you want these videos to do well, but you've basically given up Xperia 1 Mark III coverage to 2 YouTubers, sort of reviewing out of the Asian community. And by the time we're allowed to talk about the product, no one's going to be looking for the first impressions that we shot 2 months ago. So it's tricky. It's really tricky. And again, if you're going to shop a Sony, you have to understand that that's a very boutique niche of their business that's now more under the Sony Alpha department. And they're being very conservative with that product line. So let's get to... I mean, this one's pretty easy, Nick. Why did LG decide to stop making smartphones? They weren't making any money. They were losing money on their cell phone division. Yeah, it was a great deal. But if you thought that buying phones for ridiculous fire sale prices was going to last, it sadly did not. And they never improved their marketing. They never built up those customer relationships, the on-the-ground kind of consumer conversations. And eventually, the company loses patience with a department that underperforms. And TED Talks Tech, it's tricky. Xperia, I can't make Xperia. It's Sony. Rock around the clock. It's tricky. I'm not talented enough in this moment to get Xperia somewhere into that rhyme. So why don't we cover just a little bit of housekeeping? Because now apparently my website is broken and none of the images are loading on somegadgetguy.com. This could be fun. So let's see what happens here. My website totally borked. This is really strange. Okay. All right, let's see. It maybe just refreshed now. Dave Burns, web server hiccup. It kind of looked like a web server belch. Yeah, that was less good. Okay. All of the stories we're going to be talking about, including the housekeeping, will be available in the show notes for this week's episode, somegadgetguy.com, if my website continues to operate and continues to function. Just kind of charting the list here. Excuse me. One of the major stories from last week was obviously spending time with the Audeze Carbon. It's a $4,500 pair of headphones, and that embargo lifted last Monday. And we talked about that quite a bit on last Monday's podcast. But they're incredible, and I'm really jonesing to play around with some more electrostatic headphones. But moving right along, another little bit of audio goodness. I got to spend some time with the Eco Gems. This is the Eco OH1S. These are hybrid drivers. So there's a dynamic driver and a little balanced arm, in-ear monitors, and with very unique tuning. Just incredibly unique tuning for a little pair of earbuds. Whenever we see hybrid drivers, like the first that I always kind of point to are these KZ ES4s. They're 20 bucks. but the sonic characteristics of these is really consumer thumpy, very kind of low bass heavy. It's a sound that's very pleasing and in a very broad and kind of unlearned consumer kind of way. Now, the gems are $200 IEMs. And again, in every way that matters, they are built nicer than those ES4, but the tuning is extremely specific. And it's much, much lighter than I was expecting for a pair of hybrid drivers. A little balanced arm for clarity and a dynamic driver for bass, and you usually kind of end up with a smiley face EQ or a deep V, or even just sometimes like a big old bass lump. This to me feels like there's a much more specific upper mids and highs peak, a presence. They can get a little shrill on cymbals, but it's so much lighter. To me, this is a kind of very ear candy kind of tuning. One of the things we're going to be chatting about a little bit more in the gadget block in the second half. Oops, that's not what I wanted to click on. I wrote an editorial. I really want to get back to writing more than making videos for every single thing that I do. And Galaxy S21 sales are down, so I threw in my 2 cents. Again, opinions are like that thing that in that saying that's kind of distasteful, and everybody has an opinion, just like they all have various biological body parts. And I kind of felt like I needed to weigh in on this because I'm really tired of Samsung being treated as some kind of de facto standard that everyone compares against when the phone that they most compare against is down in sales to a ridiculous degree. So we're going to talk about that just a little bit more. And then lastly, this video is actually doing surprisingly well. I'm kind of happy to be kind of building a conversation around Misfit toys. But I had to kind of throw in a welcome, if you will. Did you buy a Surface Duo on a crazy sale? Welcome to the Dual Display Club. And so I just shared a few of my thoughts on what it's been like using the Surface Duo. I've kept my launch device. I paid full price, and I really don't feel like that was any great travesty. My recommendations for the Duo are still very specific, but you know, at these fire sale prices where you can grab one for like $400, yeah, I mean, that's easy to recommend for an LTE connected tablet that folds and fits in your pocket. It's kind of the best version of an iPad mini the world has ever seen. But it also kind of leans into some of those conversations. We just talked about LG. You know, you can't expect fire sale prices and then to still get innovation. If you don't buy in and really support other manufacturers, and the only thing you care about is like, well, I'll wait until it's so cheap that the company is definitely losing money, then the company is eventually going to leave you. You don't keep getting new stuff if the company can't make some money. You can get really upset about that, but you know, if you don't support competition, then you're kind of just an anchor on the whole tech conversation. That being said, if you did grab one on one of these sales, congrats, because I think you got a ridiculously good deal. Anytime you add a hinge to a product, you can kind of add $800 to the price of that gadget. If it's an LG Wing, if it's a Galaxy Fold or a Flip, the Duo, it is incredibly difficult to build a hinge, and the Duo hinge is the best. Hands down, bar none, full 360-degree wraparound, and with sides that close flush. There is no better. It is the best. And I feel $1,500 at launch was fine, was appropriate to buy the absolute best hinge tablet device on the market as one of the only ones that exists on the market. So you're also paying for exclusivity. Literally every person I've shown the Duo to has jaw dropped. I have not seen reactions to a product like that since the original iPhone. It's not just, oh, that's a really pretty phone. What case do you have on your iPhone? It is a revolutionary implementation of a dual display idea. No one else has come close. It's really not close in terms of that kind of engineering. So I'm really not impressed. I got a couple comments on people that were like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be one of their beta testers and I'm not going to buy it. And maybe when it's Gen 3, it'll be worth it. And you're like, hey, read the room. This is a video for people that did buy in. This is a video at any price. You bought in on a sale, if you bought in legit. This is a video for people who care. Well, I'm not going to be one of their guinea pigs. Well, then thank someone who was. Because if it weren't for those people out there actually trying this stuff out, then you would never get any innovation. You would never have any improvement to your products. So I actually have muted a few people that had zero to contribute to the conversation other than, I'm smarter than everyone else here for not buying this gadget. And that person can never talk to me ever again. I'm not gonna miss that conversation. that person can vanish. Thanos snap. I'll take out all those techies. I've got a bunch of comments here. Let's see if we can tackle some of these. From Nick Will, I heard that LG are going to sell iPhone and Apple Watch. Is that true? So I don't believe internationally, but LG has a series of stores in South Korea, and I don't blame them. Go make that money. If I were any executive at LG, seeing the reception that my Android products had received, I'd make every play to say, hey, we'll make more money just being a reseller for iPhones. So go get that cash. There's no, I mean, in either direction, we shouldn't act like there's some loyalty we owe multi-billion-dollar corporations, but I have a soft spot in my heart for LG. And I guarantee you, putting some iPhones on their store shelves in South Korea, they'll make more money on iPhones than they would have on their own smartphones. People are sponsoring the comments in my videos. I wish my live streams could be sponsored by some of these companies. Gabaletta, I'll keep saying it. Samsung started to decline after the Note 9 era. Wrong. The best version of an iPad mini is an iPad mini. It has a fruit logo from Dave Burns. I know, he's a rabid fruit phone fan. So this is what's interesting. So from Jonathan Gao, I really hope the Duo can have a desktop mode. So what's funny is, it seems like the Android backend desktop mode is disabled on the Duo, but when you use the Duo, it's like a better version of iPad-style multitasking. And for split screen usage, the way that you'll pop up an app on half a screen and do work on the other half a screen, it almost, not completely, but it almost doesn't need a desktop mode. Plugging it into a Nexus dock, plugging it into a portable monitor display, the aspect ratio is wrong. So even when it's fully unfurled, you get pillar boxing on a 16:9 monitor. But the actual functionality of the UI, this is why I'm so fascinated by the Duo, is it's single-handedly shown me that some simple UI tweaks would bring Android to the 21st century of tablet computing. Android could be the best tablet OS if more of this style UI were actually implemented properly on other slates. Because otherwise it's DeX. I really don't see stock Android, like big empty space Android, being a good solution for tablets. But the Duo fixes so much of that UI again, it's a beautiful merging of hardware and software. I mean, I don't want to sound like Panos Panay and get real emotional about the power. I really don't want to do that. But there is something true in this form factor makes you want to use it for other things. And Microsoft software, while it had some teething pains at the very beginning, has polished up to such a degree that it really does genuinely represent one of the best slate interfaces available. I mean, we shouldn't be too surprised because this is a company that makes the Surface. They actually do a pretty good job with tablets. So, oh, some people like talking about Pixel 6 and stuff. Oh, and Tech Love and Mama's in the chat. Everyone say, hey, Tech Love and Mama, TLM. But why don't we get through some news here, and I'll have more to say. I mean, if we want to talk Surface, we can talk Surface too. Oh, see, and again, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Gabaletta. The whole reason I bought the Tab S6 was because of DeX. It works perfectly fine as an Android tablet for media consumption, but DeX just turns it into a 10-inch powerful computer. You know, you can't get there on just Android, which is why this type of UI manipulation is so critical, but it's also not easy. What Microsoft has done in doing split screen with sort of a background that runs underneath and multitasks with gestures that can slide back and forth to expand and contract your view, Android has no ability to do this. Like anytime you see something like that, that is all custom. So yeah, there were some significant issues at launch, but it was only into like the second major update that not only did it get way better, and I went back to using gesture navigation as opposed to the 3-button nav, it got really good. So even your orientation issues were all mostly ironed out a couple months in. And I know like people, oh, it should have been perfect. It's so expensive. No device is. No gadget works that way. Samsung had to hold a whole bunch of significant functionality from the Fold 2, and One UI updates eventually fulfilled what they promised that thing could do. Every gadget goes through this process, but for some reason, we think it's fine if it's something like a Samsung or an iPhone. I mean, don't even get me started on like iPhones and camera promises, because they take forever to really fulfill their promises, and there's no guarantee your old iPhone is going to get any of that improved functionality. All right. Real quick, we have a little FCC news to talk about. Oh, by the way, yeah, housekeeping and introduction took a half hour, so let's not dilly-dally too much on the news here. I've covered FCC news a lot in the past. One of the issues facing our current regulators, we don't have good data on real life internet coverage. Excuse me. From the Ajit Pai days, we were allowing ISPs and carriers to kind of self-report what their coverage was like. Over this year, we've seen a marked push towards the FCC actually trying to cobble together some data on usage. They spruced up their speed test app. So, you know, most people are going to use Ookla, the speedtest.net. But the FCC also has their own speed testing application, and that data goes directly into verifying the reports and claims of these carriers and ISPs. And now the FCC is building its own coverage map of all of the LTE carriers out there. So if you go to fcc.maps.arcgiz.com/app/web-app-viewer/index.html, and I'm not going to mess with all that. Obviously, this will be in the link on the show notes, but now you can come in and you can get a better look. Let's see, can I get them to refresh this though? It was working just a minute ago. Dang it. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my web connection. I'm afraid to refresh this because I don't want the stream to drop out, but let me give this a try. It's doing its thing, it's refreshing. United States Federal Communications Commission. And app state, click to restore the map layers. Man, I don't know why this got weird. So unfortunately, what we're supposed to see on this right-hand panel, which is blank, is this is so frustrating. So the FCC still has a ways to go to clean this up, and of course I'm trying to do this live while streaming, so it's not working like it should. But what we should be seeing here on this right-hand side is a list of the carriers that are in this area, and then you can toggle individual carriers to show their coverage on the map. So this was super anticlimactic. I'm very excited for the functionality of this, and I love that. Well, first of all, I love that it's using Here Maps and Garmin GPS, but then also it was really cool when it was working. So if you're on the audio version of this podcast for the replay crew, you're getting just as good a view of the data as the people watching the live stream. Let me just try San Antonio. San Antonio, Texas. Okay, I'm clicking and nothing. Man, I'm so bummed about this. All right, well, let me just go back to my camera. Anyway, I'll have the link there. When you're not doing a live stream, it'll probably work. But this is just another baby step. So again, I would still wholeheartedly recommend, if you can, run the FCC Speed Test app. This data is contributing to getting a better portrait of how data is spreading. And again, right now, this looks like it's focused more on LTE, being the majority of consumers out there still on LTE devices. And as we build this kind of data, instead of looking at a carrier map, which tells you very little about the real service quality, we could go to a place where hopefully the website will work that genuinely compares and contrasts carriers against each other in real time. That kind of stuff is really difficult to do. If I look at a coverage map for where I live now, all the carriers say, yep, you're covered, LTE, you're gonna do great. But really running speed tests like around my neighborhood showed significant differences in the quality of signal, how fast those data speeds were, and how powerful the connections were. So that's the kind of stuff that we actually really need to be building, like a genuine accounting, being able to verify this kind of data. Oh, Heike, Juan must keep his house so tidy because housekeeping is always so thorough. Let's see. Previous Gadget Lab had leaf blowers. New Gadget Lab has crap ISP. True. Very true. Hashtag not my FCC. I love it. Aditya Anil, T-Mobile versus Verizon, who will win? How much coverage does the average consumer really need? And I love it when we use those arguments for like broadband. I mean, what are you doing on your internet connection? Why do you need gigabit? It's so lame. All right. I wanted to highlight this one too because we've been talking about platforms that disseminate content, that distribute content. And like I said, Spotify is going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. I feel we as consumers need to push back aggressively against any type of apparatus that's going to try and turn podcasting into a proprietary platform. We don't want anyone to win the podcast wars. We don't want anyone to get a toehold. There are going to be all of these plays for like Apple, premium podcasts, and wow, it's going to be so easy. And you're going to be on our platform and we get a cut and this is going to be so great for everybody. And that to me sounds awful. So when we see someone take a step back from that, like they probably got a decently lucrative deal, but now they're looking at some other type of distribution and platform, I think it's worth keeping an eye on. I feel like outside of platforms like YouTube, sorry, excuse me, outside of platforms like YouTube, Twitch, these sort of mega hosting platforms that help us stream and distribute content, podcasting really is the last true singular distribution point platform. It takes very little for you to start recording some audio, attach it to an RSS feed, and share it on anything that can accept some type of podcast subscription. So this to me was encouraging of a trend that I hope to see more podcasters jumping on. The Nod hosts ditch Spotify to relaunch their original show. The co-hosts of The Nod are back, and this time they've separated from Gimlet Media and Spotify and are instead taking their work to SiriusXM's Stitcher. Brittany Luse and Eric Eddings tell The Verge today that they're relaunching their Black Culture show for colored nerds this fall, which they created, hosted, and produced prior to working at Gimlet. The podcast will be available widely and isn't exclusive to one platform, which is great. I like Podcast Republic. That's my favorite podcasting app. I get their RSS feed, I put it in my app, audio downloads to my phone, and I'm happy. That is exactly the relationship that I want with podcasting. I used to subscribe to a bunch of the Gimlet podcasts. I used to listen to, what is it? I can't remember. It was like true crime and horror. Is it Last Podcast on the Left? I think that's what the name of the show was. Someone please remind me if anyone else used to listen to that awful show. It wasn't an awful show. I just mean, like, you know, the subject matter was always very challenging. I could never listen to that show while Lex was in the car. But again, moving to Spotify makes the acquisition of that content one step more difficult, and I don't like how Spotify organizes and streams podcasts. And I'm not subscribed to Spotify Premium, and that makes this even more of a challenge for how, you know, ad blocks usually work on other podcasts and players. So it's interesting. It's interesting to keep an eye on this, and I hope to see a few other content creators really look at what it is that they're trying to accomplish and where they're hosting and distributing their content. It kind of makes a statement now, like, who's supporting you and who are you supporting? And Tech Love and Mama, I've kind of backed off true crime. So Tech Love and Mama says, I love true crime and horror podcasts. I really need to find more horror. I kind of backed off true crime because there's this kind of sick, salacious, like, I'm making myself a part of this terrible thing that happened to real people, and it makes me look cool kind of vibe that's running through the true crime community. A lot of documentaries that you get to the end and you're like, whoa, basically we were just here to kind of wallow in human suffering, but they'll throw a wink at the end, like, maybe the real reason that people do these things is because people like you are watching documentaries like this. And like, well, you made the documentary and I watched it, so now why are you coming down on me? I watched your stuff. So anyway, but I really want to get back. I would just always loved horror and horror film commentary and scary stories, so I got to get back into that. Gary the Fireman. Well, I mean, like, by design, he says horror scares the poop out of me, but with stronger language. And you're like, yeah, isn't that the point? So why don't we? I had a couple other stories in here, but I'm running so long on news and stuff. Why don't we just jump to Apple, and why don't we just get that out of the way? So I feel like in numerous conversations and on numerous podcasts in the past, there's a thread of techies talking about this stuff. Apple does a really good job of marketing their commitment to privacy. I feel like they genuinely have never lived up to the claims made by their marketing. And they love to conflate privacy with data security. They advertise heavily while they also work against some of their own initiatives. For iOS 14, they were talking of, oh, we're going to change our policy for social media. Any apps on your phone that try to utilize your data, they've got to get all these extra permissions. Everything's going to be opt-in. But at the same time, they were delaying while more heavily advertising their stance on privacy. And eventually, they came out with AirTags, which just signed you in to their Find find network, whether you had AirTags or wanted to be a part of that kind of location tracking or not. So they really, really care about your privacy until they come out with a product or service that it would benefit them to opt you in to something that could potentially violate your privacy. So no one is going to suggest that combating images of child abuse is a bad thing. I actually did an interview with some of the researchers and some of the folks working with law enforcement to find new digital solutions in the 21st century to combat abuse as it happens on the internet. Is it ECPAT? I can't remember how you pronounce it. Let me just, ECPAT. Here, I'll drop this into the chat. It really is an interesting conversation. It's about 14 minutes. Here, I'll drop that in right there. This video did not perform well, by the way. And this is like old Some Gadget Guy. Yeah, the director, I got to speak with Carol Smolensky. That is hard for me to say. She was the executive director of ECPAT. This is an incredible challenge facing these types of organizations, law enforcement, and just general consumers. No one is suggesting that we should ever back off. We should make this as distasteful. We should make this as punitively punished by our legal system as we absolutely can. But at the same time, Apple instituting a new policy of scanning content on phones, I find to be a very troubling one. The actual implementation of this policy from Apple does not seem to address the creation of abusive imagery. It's referencing imagery that's already been created. This is already a part of their system for iCloud. Basically, if you use any cloud storage, they are analyzing the quality of the data to try and find content that might be like criminal. Not objectionable, but like scary, dangerous, bad. This has always been a part of basically the terms of service you sign for any cloud storage. It works on iCloud currently. Your data on someone else's server is kind of not your data. And you are engaging in a relationship to say the convenience of having it stored up in the cloud means that I am, sort of allowing some of the nature of this content to be analyzed. You have to be a really bad criminal to put criminal activity up on a cloud server. Like, it's just the nature of how this works today. So what Apple is doing, though, is before you send content up to iCloud, if it's currently linked with an iCloud account, it starts scanning and comparing the data on your phone or your tablet before it gets sent up to iCloud. I have a big problem with some type of search on my private information where there's no warrant. There's no suggestion from law enforcement that I've done anything wrong. You are searching my content before there's an accusation. There is a black box algorithm. Apple is not going to detail what quantity or quality of data will red flag their system. There's a human at the end of this chain which has to verify the positive when a red flag goes off on Apple HQ. So-and-so's phone has questionable images on it. Then someone has to verify that content. We don't know what the process is for that. And then eventually it gets reported to the FBI. Or if you have a child account, the phone is going to report activity on that device to the parents who own that account. So again, the whole notion is like, hey, if your teens are sending risky images of kids to each other, we're going to alert the parents that this is activity on the phone. I don't like the idea of Apple as a mega corporation getting involved in the content that my child might produce on one of their products. So the way that the system works, at least as I understand it, I'm trying not to like fidget, and this conversation makes me a little uncomfortable because I think we all know what's at stake on both sides. Having better tools for law enforcement to go after trafficking and abuse would be such a huge boon. That would be an amazing win. And at the other end of the spectrum is like the protection of every facet of waking life being funneled through pocket computers. The contents of my phone are as close to me as like the contents of my brain. It's almost a cyborg attachment at this point. And the notion that anyone can kind of just go through and take a peek makes me deeply uncomfortable. And again, from the company that sort of protected encryption back during the San Bernardino shooter trial, saying we're not going to build a backdoor into our devices, has just built, I feel, one of the most insidious backdoors in a piece of telecommunications equipment that we've ever seen. It's just rife for abuse. Let me take a quick drink of water here real quick. So, there's something called the hash. It's like a digital fingerprint. And someone please augment what I'm saying in the chat, like especially like Dave Burns and some of those other guys that are a bit more into like the actual back end on web infrastructure and coding and stuff. I'm grossly oversimplifying here. But the hash is kind of like a fingerprint. It verifies that what you downloaded is what you meant to download. So let's say you're downloading an installer, there's a hash. You could compare that hash against what file actually arrives on your computer, and you could see, hey, is there anything different here? Because that's not what I want to install. Especially like when you're going through like code repositories and stuff, like you'll see as like a security, this is what you're supposed to be downloading. So when you hash an image, back in the day, any change to that image would result in a different hash. So if you're just looking at these strings of digital fingerprints, say you've got an image of, you took a selfie at the beach, and then you ran a very basic Instagram filter that just mildly changed the contrast. Functionally, those two images would look nearly identical. But compared against the hash, they would show up as two completely different pieces of information. The hash would point to them as being not the same, even though the final product, what we would actually interact with that information, would be very, very similar. So what Apple is creating is an AI machine learning method building a more progressive hash where changes to the data don't reflect a completely different piece of information. You have two images and they're extremely similar. This progressive hash should be able to tell that these images are extremely similar. And it's this huge like database of images that Apple is going to be storing, and all of this takes place on device. So the scanning, the CPU power of your phone, the battery life of your phone, depending on how it's implemented, the storage on your phone, how it interacts with like the machine learning cores and the neural cores that are actually in the CPU, in the SoC, I should say. All of that's going to have to take place on the phone. And we don't yet know to what degree will that change up storage? Will that deplete battery life? How often is it going to be verifying this information against what's stored on your device? Is it going to be like with every new file that gets sort of taken or downloaded? But then the concern is also, how are they building more comparable data? Because this is an arms race. New imagery is being created, and some of it probably being created on mobile devices. So how are they reconciling this arms race? How are they adding to the list of hashed content? So the other major concern here is the system is not totally, the system is not totally locked to just images of abuse. At some point, you could take this this machine that Apple is creating and just point it towards other content. Let's say you've got an oppressive regime, and there are some consistent, images or videos or audio that pop up in speaking out against that regime. It would be very easy to adopt this entire mechanism and point it towards undesirable people in your country that are trying to make trouble for that regime. I absolutely abhor using the slippery slope argument, because most of the time I feel slippery slope is getting to an end conclusion that is unlikely. Like, oh, well, if you let people do this, then why wouldn't this most terrible thing happen? What Apple has built here, the terrible outcome, is literally the next step. It's not a chain of events that is very unlikely that it's going to play out that way. And then we get to, an end game where iPhones and Apple products are being used by terrible, terrible people to like control populations. It's like only a couple steps removed from what's already being implemented. As soon as you fill the hash bucket of undesirable content with anything else, it's going to report. It's going to trigger the red flags. It's going to send data to Apple. Apple wants to sell phones everywhere. They have a vested interest in trying to move as much product in as much quantity, and they've already been playing by local rules in a number of countries, like we talked about pre-installed software in Russia. Russia is building apps that they want their citizens to use, and against Apple's posturing, where they would never do that. They would never force people to install certain apps on their iPhones, like especially here in the United States. They're doing that in Russia. We talked about that, I want to say it was about a month ago. So the next step of this is, what content is on a Russian citizen's phone? Is there anything that might be concerning to the current government, to the current military apparatus there? And then you kind of build that in so that the iPhone will report. And it's a complete black box. We will never be given insight. It's not open. It's not shared. It's not cross-checked. Apple is operating this. So if Apple wants to be in compliance with a local government, and the local government says, hey, if you want to sell your phones here, we got to be able to see if people are speaking out against our government. Or they might even just say, hey, Apple, you want plausible deniability. Here is the bucket of hashed information that we think is objectionable. So you don't even have to know what the contents are. We're just giving you the hashes. Plug that data into your system and you'll be allowed to sell iPhones here in Russia. And then Apple has plausible deniability. Apple can say, we're just complying with the state government. Privacy is not dead, but privacy has taken a pretty wicked beating. And it's moves like this, where Apple has bought all the goodwill. I'm most disappointed in Apple because one of the few victories we could point to was how Apple was not kowtowing to law enforcement requests to break the encryption on iPhones. It's not Apple's job to make their product less secure, in my opinion. It's law enforcement's job to build a better battering ram. When we bought a house, I don't take a copy of my keys and give them to the police so they can enter my house whenever they feel like it. They have to get a warrant. And if I don't comply with the warrant, then they have the right to break down my door. I can try and build a better lock, but that's the relationship. It's an arms race, and then eventually escalates to building the better battering ram. And we've already seen that. There are already a number of, like with the Pegasus issue, spyware that can kind of be quietly installed on iOS devices to keep track of people if they're, troublesome individuals. Often it gets kind of lumped in with, journalists who are reporting about different politicians. This seems to be yet another significant step towards us not only not owning our devices, but also not owning the content that we store on these devices, and our devices actively reporting on us. The guise of trying to wrap this up as a protecting the children commentary, I don't think it's Apple's job. I think it's law enforcement's job to work with Apple and to work with other organizations around the world to get a better handle and grip on human trafficking and abuse and how we can put a stop to it. I hate to say it like this, but it's Apple's job to protect the privacy and the security of their customers' data. And any step that sort of infringes on that, I feel, is a step in the wrong direction. I feel like my feelings on this got way more emotional, and I was way more upset when, and this came by way of Dexter Cumberbatch. This is an individual who loves to send me political news on Twitter. I just want to read a little bit about this here. So originally shared by, I can't pronounce that last name, Kobeisi from Kpora on Twitter. Apple distributed an internal memo today which referred to pushback against its new content surveillance measures as, quote, the screeching voices of the minority, end quote. Team Apple, I wanted to share a note of encouragement to say that everyone at NCMEC is so proud of each of you and the incredible decisions you have made in the name of prioritizing child protection. It's been invigorating for our entire team to see and play a small role in what you unveiled today. I know it's been a long day and that many of you probably haven't slept in 24 hours. We know that the days to come will be filled with the screeching voices of the minority. Our voices will be louder. So essentially what we arrive at is kind of brilliant from a marketing perspective. Apple can now live off of the goodwill of all of their privacy marketing, which we know genuinely isn't any better than any other platform, especially in a web-connected device current day. But they built that up. They get to reap the benefits of that mind share of privacy. Apple, we've got the billboards, it must be true. And at the same time, now they can also shame their competitors. Well, we here at Apple take a hard stance against child abuse, and well, I guess Google or Microsoft or Amazon, they must be okay with criminal activity on their services. Well, it's a shame, you'd think that those companies would also care about the children too. And it's kind of disgusting because this all gets branded and it's all just marketing. And they're turning a terrible idea into some kind of virtue that hopefully will also help them sell more units. Not just here in the United States, but then also in other countries where maybe they've had a little difficulty because of their policies on things like encryption. Now they don't need to break the encryption on their phones, but hey, if you need to get a peek at what your people are doing in the privacy of their own homes and on their own phones, like I'm sure we can kind of work around that. There's an apparatus that will protect those privacy issues, but then also give you everything that you'd want to see if they were sharing any objectionable content. this isn't a slippery slope in the traditional sense. This is a step away from immediate and tangible abuse by governments around the globe, including governments here at home. I find this move to be deeply disturbing, and ultimately tremendously disappointing from a company that I genuinely respected their stance on encryption. So I know a lot of people were bringing up iCloud. Oh, well, they were going to encrypt data on iCloud, but then they didn't because the FBI got involved. Once you upload your data to someone else's computer, you don't have any right to the same kind of privacy. That's their property, their data infrastructure. They own that. So I don't feel Apple would have had a great legal argument to say iCloud is just as locked down as the iPhone and no one can get a peek if their servers are the ones handling and distributing that data. Their servers are now Apple's property, and because of the way that search warrants work, you probably get a peek, right? But this is horrific to me, seeing how we're now taking that extra step where the phone in my hands is now able to report on me. And I know it's unlikely that we're going to see a bunch of false positives. I believe Apple was saying something to the tune of like 1 out of a trillion images might get flagged as a false positive. The internet is responsible for generating trillions of images. Those aren't great odds to say like, oh, you might not get flagged. But again, it shouldn't be a process where you're sort of guilty until you can prove you're innocent. They searched your phone first with no recognition of potential wrongdoing or potential harms. And then you have to go through whatever process Apple creates for that image getting flagged, maybe getting reported to the FBI. This is woefully under-detailed. Apple's strategy and the conversation Apple is having is still cloaked in that don't worry about the specifics kind of conversation. You know, like Apple used to never be about the specs. Oh, well, it's the best consumer experience. You can just trust us, bro. Just trust us, because we're telling you what's true. It's the most powerfulest and the most forward-thinkingest and the bestest. That's all you need to know. And they're handling one of the biggest conversations in consumer privacy and data security ever entertained, ever conversed with the same kind of chill, bro, what's a computer style of marketing. And I feel like we all need to have much bigger problems with that. So, I'm probably going to put like a little standalone video out, or maybe I'll just take a cut of this podcast and put it up as a short or something. But I will not be reviewing the iPhone 13s. I typically kind of go every other year. I got a little weird when I went iPhone XS to iPhone 11, but I didn't spend time with the iPhone 12. I don't really feel iPhones give you any kind of value year over year. And it hurts my channel. Again, the SEO on not talking about Apple in every single video kills viewership and the algorithm and the popularity. But this was the year to check. Whatever iPhone 13 or iPhone 12s or whatever it was going to be called, I was going to spend some time this year and try and work it to compare against the new Pixel. And I'm just not going to do that this year. I'm going to walk away. I don't feel like contributing to a conversation about Apple products where at the same time I always have to crouch it in this, well, I mean, if they're the right fit for you. So instead, I'll be taking those opportunities to kind of remind people of why I'm not spending time with an iPhone. I feel this is a terrible strategy from Apple. It's not going to be good for my channel. It's not going to be good for the quality of my commentary, because I should know what Apple products are capable of, and I should have more hands-on with them and be able to more directly compare them against the competition. But I can't, in good conscience, support this apparatus. And so I'll be bowing out. I'm going to not put my money where my mouth is and not scramble to make the content that makes me more money on YouTube. But I'll try to engage in these conversations where I think people deserve a more considered or a more nuanced focus on this idea of privacy. We can win some of these victories back, but people have to care, and it has to affect Apple's bottom line. And it's really going to be the only thing that kind of motivates some notion of change. And we can't do that when the hype machine is just, whoa, the iPhone 13 is so amazeballs, and it's the most powerfulest iPhone ever. And that doesn't work. Like, that's not going to change Apple's behavior. I bought every iPhone in this lineup, but you should be concerned about Apple privacy. But if you don't have anything to hide, well, then what are you worried about? You know, like, we're going to watch techies jump through all these hoops and play these games. We're going to be really upset about this now, but then they got to make their cash when the new iPhone comes out. So I'm not going to play that game. I am way off the chat. Simon says Hypno, but it's 15% faster. Oh, man. And no one can demonstrate to me why that matters or why they need that. I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. I am in a safe space for having these kinds of conversations. So I appreciate those of you who have been along for the ride. It makes me really anxious and it makes me nervous kind of talking about stuff like this. We've always had issues with things like encryption. We've always had conflict over consumer data security versus law enforcement and the protection of populations. But this era of social media has escalated so quickly that our legal apparatus, our lawyers, our judges, our law enforcement officers, it is scary to see how we are not holding up, keeping up with the pace of the innovation that's in front of us. And I just genuinely, again, I feel like those of us in this live stream right now, in this conversation, if you're catching the replay, I feel like you're savvy enough with technology to enjoy a conversation like this, to also understand that, like, an AI hashing, checking algorithm is not going to be as bulletproof as Apple is trying to make it sound. Like people won't get hurt by this system, even in its current form, before it gets kind of augmented for other state activities. It's just not possible to make something, for humans to make something and train it and have it work the way that Apple is describing. So, from Gorm Lord, sorry, I needed that as a joke. That Pine phone keeps looking better and better. Again, it's shocking that we're having these conversations, but Android devices genuinely do, after this announcement, do seem to be the better solutions for some notion of device security and device privacy. For as much as we talk about, oh, Android and Google's going to sell off all your data, that's not Google's business model. If Google sold off all your data, companies wouldn't need Google for advertising. Google has a vested interest in keeping your bucket of data as locked down as possible so that people will keep paying Google as the gatekeeper to those consumer trends. So this is a very different conversation than what people make it out to be. And Google is a giant, massive advertising corporation that we should absolutely be scrutinizing their business practices and anything that infringes upon consumer rights or is anti-competitive, especially in the world of advertising, where they've kind of steamrollered over every other competitor. But when you hold an Android phone, at present, it's not scanning your content and reporting back to Google. If you upload something to your G Drive, Google was already scanning that stuff, just like Apple was with iCloud, just like Microsoft was with OneDrive, just like Amazon does with their cloud storage solutions. That was already a thing. Apple is taking us further down this path, and I really wish they weren't. So, oh, and also Aditya Nil. I mean, it's a shockingly large bucket. Aditya writes, I'd hate to see the bucket of data Google has on me. One, I'd recommend it. Google has to comply. They will show you the entire bucket. And it's pretty intense how much stuff they collect on you. So I'd recommend checking it out. So, short story, incredibly long. I actually want to thank you all for still entertaining these political conversations, because most of the time I'm just cranky, nerdy Juan talking about the FCC and net neutrality. This one scared me. I kept looking for the benefit of the doubt. I kept looking for, okay, but what's really here, and where is the media blowing up this data? And then like the EFF started putting out statements on it. And then security researchers started putting out concerns. Journalists started talking about how they're targeted in certain countries and how their phones have already been attacked by governments and by shadowy organizations. And then we saw that tweet talking about how people like the EFF and security researchers were this screeching minority. And that one just got me. I was kind of willing to go with the benefit of the doubt, but circulating that as an internal memo to Apple employees, like that's going to be their rallying cry. Like that's going to be, we're going to stay the course on this. I mean, that one pushed me over the edge. So I appreciate y'all, because this is a really grown-up conversation. It's a really grotesque conversation. It is difficult on all sides. It is phenomenally just one of the most extreme challenges of life in the 21st century digital economy. And I hope for every tool that we can utilize against human trafficking and abuse. But I still need us to uphold our right to privacy. I still need us to defend the rights of citizens. I mean, I'm obviously speaking from the privilege of living in North America. We can't throw that away for a system that doesn't look like it's been properly vetted yet. I think that's about all I really need to say. So, you know. Gary the Fireman, go back and see how creepy you actually are by going into your Google history. I mean, I've got all those images of the creepy tunnel. I need to do my pilgrimage. So I'm going to try and take a bucket of phones and go and reshoot the creepy tunnel. I'm hoping maybe even next week of kind of trekking back out to my old stomping ground. And Gabaletta, this is absolutely true, and I don't have a good answer for it. The hardest part is the balancing act. How do we punish those who do bad, but also not infringing onto someone's rights? And someone smarter than me is going to have to figure that out. But at the same time, I feel like I'm still qualified to push back against trends that I think are steps in the wrong direction. Especially with circulating the memo of screeching minority, I definitely feel Apple is on the wrong side of this particular conversation. El Jefe Reviews, better late than never. Sup, everyone? Ooh, ooh. So, let me get this out of the way here. Let's just take a quick moment to plug the subreddit. I had a really good week on the subreddit, so we're not gonna hang out too long. But every podcast has a subreddit. Mine is an attempt to try and broaden tech conversations to, the whole focus is to share content you feel deserves more attention, and then using Reddit to try and popularize and add more voices to sharing that content. And yeah, I did real good. I did real good on reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles, my Surface Duo video, A#1, my Galaxy S21 editorial, A#2. I'm number one. and number two. I'm number one, and number two. Number three, GSM Arena. Hey, looky here. I love those guys over at GSM Arena. Checking out the Xperia 5 Mark III. And then rounding out the top five, we've got Adu Buba checking out the Galaxy A22 with 800 subscribers. Top five video, number four spot from someone who has yet to crack 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. I will click subscribe, give them one more, click that up arrow, because I am supporting content that I hope finds more audience. But also checking out a great little value phone, the Galaxy A22. And then rounding out the top five, we've got Trent's Tech. Pixel 5a is a steal, and I'm going to give that an upvote there too. Trent, where is he at? He's at 6,700 subscribers. I really feel Trent's style of commentary deserves an extra zero at the end of that subscriber list. Actually, I kind of feel that way with almost all the reviewers and the commentators that make it onto Glowing Rectangles. Like, you could just add a couple zeros. That'd be fine. Trent is definitely one of those. Aw, and Jeff. Jeff's one of the moderators at Glowing Rectangles. I'm the screeching minority in the true wireless space. Aw, buddy. Now, I kind of feel you're leading the charge on good audio conversations, because that's going to be for healthier listening and happier listening. Reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. We need your support. We need your interactions. We need your sharing. Don't be stingy with the upvotes. This is every week becoming a broader community. We're finding new content creators. We're finding new voices in the world of tech. And if you don't want your tech commentary to be locked down by a Facebook sorting style algorithm where only like the largest channels ever really get kind of shoved up under your nose, I guarantee you come to Glowing Rectangles, you come to this subreddit, you're going to find people you've never seen on YouTube that are making brilliant content, and you might just find your new favorite content creators there. So one more time, reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles, and you should definitely check it out. All right. I got to throw a shout out here because Mr. TK Bay just hooked up a whole bunch of tier 1 subs. TK Bay sent out to All Greg, to Uncle Elias, Matt Tyler, Arkyle ACNH, and Nom. So major thank you. That is a great hookup. Thank you so much for supporting this production, this stream. TK, of course, is my host. Every Thursday we do a live stream called The Best of Our Week, where we kind of wrap up what our favorite tech of the week is. And I believe it's hashtag TKMyBay. So I think you got that wrong, Aditya. It's hashtag TKMyBay. But no, he's a really super cool dude. TK, thank you, man. That was really cool. And again, thank you for supporting production, but then also spreading the love. All right, where are we? 10:22. I think we got enough time to talk a little Xiaomi and then wrap up some Samsung. All right, let me get this out of the way. DTNL, screw you, Juan. It's TK Hourbay. LFA reviews, hashtag some TK is my friend guy. He's my friend. Our bay, comrade. He's not your bay, he's our bay. He's our bay. Gary got there just as I did. I feel like we were wavelengthing there, Gary. Real quick story to jump into. I am a zealot for competition. Increasingly, as we're watching players like LG leave this space, Microsoft find difficulty in cracking into this space, and some of the other companies like ZTE, Asus, Nokia, I feel struggling to kind of build that mind share of growing the brand in certain regions, in certain areas, especially here in North America. Stories like this are really interesting to me. So last quarter, Xiaomi became the top smartphone brand globally, despite having no US presence. This is written up by Pranav over at XDA Developers. That is incredible. From the article, Xiaomi is having one hell of a year. The company recently dethroned Samsung in the European market to become the best-selling smartphone brand in Q2 2021, and now it has achieved the same status globally, even though it does not operate in the US market. That is huge. First, I really need this to underpin how out of touch United States tech reviewers are with the global smartphone market. Obviously, Xiaomi has made some inroads. I mean, even I've been playing with more Xiaomi this year than I think I ever have before. Here's my Mi 11 Lite and my Mi 11i. Brilliant phones. I mean, just powerhouse baller phones, great hardware. But I very infrequently get to play with Xiaomi in the same way that I have access to Samsung devices, like on every street corner, or how I used to be kind of an LG shill. This is still fresh for me. Like using MIUI is a way less familiar interface. Western reviewers posture like they're authorities on this subject while talking about the most expensive phones from manufacturers like Samsung, and then also trying to have this conversation crouched in this notion of, but what average consumers do on their phones. Xiaomi making it to #1 this last quarter is a huge upset in this market, and absolutely details that the rest of the world is not considering the Galaxy S21 some gold standard device, where Samsung is actually most competitive in the mid-range on Galaxy A series phones, but that's also where Xiaomi and their incredible lineup, and BBK with their also like huge spread of different brands and labels and manufacturers, are absolutely eating into Samsung's market dominance. Where here in the United States, half of all phones are probably iPhones, but like depending on what analyst you follow, like 30% of other phones sold are Samsung. You know, somewhere between 20 and 30, depending on the quarter and depending on the market, and especially with LG out of the way, something tells me that number's gone up for Samsung. When 80% of a country's market is practically decided by two companies, it makes that market way less desirable. We don't have healthy competition in the United States, and we have tech reviewers that play into the popularity of those two brands for their own self-interests, for their own profitability. You can't expect tech reviewers to make videos about less popular devices because then they won't make as much money. But that also feeds this cycle. It's a bad loop to be in, and it wrecks competition, and it definitely serves up techies as being untrustworthy for all of the average consumers that they claim to be looking out for. So I've been very impressed with Xiaomi. Definitely pros and cons. Some things that I really like about their phones and some things I wish they'd improve, but that's kind of true of every other brand. And that definitely seems to be resonating around the world. This year has been, I would say, I guess I should say these last 3 years have been huge for watching Xiaomi grow. As much as tech enthusiasts want to whine and cry about OnePlus's recent pivots, adding more products, becoming more of a sub-brand of Oppo, we can't deny that for a tiny little label that didn't used to sell a lot of phones, in Europe and in the United States, I believe sales for OnePlus are up something crazy, like 400% year over year, because they're not catering to the Western idea of tech enthusiasts, and they are actually trying to broaden their market out and find average consumers as opposed to just talking about average consumers. So this success is kind of incredible. I feel like one of the things, because I'm going to use this to kind of pivot into the Galaxy S21. I would highly recommend, I'll add it to the show notes. It's not in there right now. I mean, I haven't published the show notes anyway. Haha. Excuse me. I mentioned this recently. There was a brilliant video from TechAltar talking about the fall of Samsung in China. kind of analyzing sort of the timeline of how Samsung was doing really well in China. Other brands started competing. We saw Huawei eat up a certain kind of the market. Then BBK and Xiaomi and these other labels started competing against these other devices, and it left Samsung completely. Samsung completely underestimated that competition. Here in the United States, I feel we're starting to see a flavor of that, but we've already locked up this market to becoming a de facto duopoly between Samsung and Apple. So increasingly, I feel we're seeing more people leave Android because they're leaving Samsung, and there's not a lot of competition in Android in the United States for how we shop phones through carriers. So the only other viable option would be an iPhone. I would highly recommend checking out that TechAltar video just because Samsung spends on marketing to make it seem like they are ubiquitous and indomitable. This is absolutely not true. The marketing on, especially on Galaxy S, but across like their whole portfolio, just like every other label, they're making way more money in the mid-range. Galaxy A is the place to be. Galaxy S is kind of a dog. I would say since the S10, we've seen a steady decline in the value proposition of buying a Samsung premium tier. So, Simon says Hypno. Again, how will they pronounce Xiaomi? Because again, it's really hard. Like Xperia 1 III. It's just so hard to say. And everyone say hey to Tech Potato. He says, howdy, it looks like I'm late. Better late than never. I'm glad you're here. You arrived exactly when you needed to arrive. But you missed all the heavy-handed conversation about Apple and privacy and security. So I'm not going back to that. Yes, we're transitioning over to Samsung and the Galaxy S21. And I find this to be interesting, and there's just a little touch of schadenfreude. As many of you know, I was a diehard Apple enthusiast way back in the PowerPC days. I was an Apple product specialist. I worked on a DOE contract for just-in-time tech reseller. I would go to Los Alamos National Labs. I had a security card. I mean, I was vetted for sensitive areas of the lab to help run maintenance. We were putting together Xserves and G5s, especially those dual-core, dual-socket, water-cooled G5s were just brilliant to work on. I loved those machines so much. And somewhere in a folder in my closet, I actually do have my certificate. I was an Apple product specialist. I actually knew what I was doing, ripping open the guts of these boxes. That obviously kind of changed. I feel like Apple walked away from people like me as tech enthusiasts, and so I kind of found other solutions and other products that made me happy. Samsung was very similar, especially around Note 4 era Samsung. I was insufferable. I was that Samsung nerd. I was the Samsung knight. And increasingly, especially from Galaxy S6 on, I didn't like the direction they were heading. They got rid of products that I really liked, like the Active line of phones. I loved those Actives. I still might try and pick up an S8 Active. It's the only one I don't have. I even have that weird, it's not really an Active. Hold on, let me grab it. It's not really an Active, but it's the Sprint version of an Active that came in the weird like blue armor. I even have this one. Like this was not a great phone. Is this the removable back? Yeah. You could peel off the back. I mean, I adored. Oh, it even has a SIM card in it still. I seriously doubt it gets service. I was that guy who was super annoying. It's got an IR blaster and a headphone jack and a memory card slot, and it's armor plated with tactile buttons. This is a great phone. It makes me crazy. So, TK Bay, I have that same one as well in the same color. Of course you do, TK, because you have taste. And we have a ridiculous collection of museum pieces that we care about in our smartphone commentary, increasingly less so for Samsung. As Samsung has made some of these changes to how they lost that vibe of being wacky and experimental. They stopped playing around, and especially from like the S9 on, it really became a, what is Apple doing? Let's make fun of them for a year, and then let's copy it the year after. And that happened with the headphone jack, and that happened with removing accessories from the box, like chargers. I'm grossly oversimplifying. This is a humongous corporation, but it's difficult to not pin move after move after move where Apple was successful with something, made more money off of their consumers, pulled features, pulled services, and then Samsung replicating a part of that business model. I needed something Samsung in-house to run some coverage on. I'm going to be working with more laptop docks. I love that kind of hardware. I really do passionately believe in like desktop modes. I'm going to be looking to try and get my hands on a Motorola soon so I can play with Ready 4 because I feel like that's good competition. TCL, their desktop mode, surprisingly good for a first generation, but really mostly only usable with their glasses. Going back, Galaxy S21 didn't do it for me. Galaxy S20 didn't do it for me. I went back to the S10. So the last Samsung phone I genuinely enjoyed using was the S10e. You put a gun to my head, I will happily tell you that the LG G8, the main competition to the S10e, was the better phone. Genuinely the better phone. Better screen, better headphone jack, better camera software, better camera output, just across the board. G8 was the better phone. But if I need something Samsung, this is the last time I really had fun. Everything since this phone, for me, talking about Samsung has been kind of a chore. The closest I got to like, oh, this could be kind of, but there are so many compromises to be made here was the Note 20 Ultra. That thing was stupid powerful. In fact, if you have a Note 20 Ultra, you're still doing better in most applications, real world, than you would be if you were jumping on the Snapdragon 888. Especially with the way that Samsung throttles your CPU out of the box. So I went back to the S10e. I got it for 180 bucks used, kind of in really good condition for being used. So we finally got the sort of sales numbers for the first half of 2021. And I wrote up the editorial. So this is my editorial here, where we can finally admit the Galaxy S21 is just a dog. Year over year over year. So Galaxy S21 sales are down about 20% from last year. The Galaxy S20 in the same 6-month period significantly outsold the S21. From the Galaxy S10 to the S21, sales are down almost 45% looking at that same time period. So I gotta point this out. So I published this editorial, and I wish I had screenshotted it because it killed the comment. I got another one of those like, well, one, you're just an insufferable, I forget how he said it, but it was insufferable Samsung hater. And something along the lines of like, everything you do is to just shill the companies that are nice to you. And I wrote out a reply and I was like, hey, every time I criticize Samsung, I get, feedback like this. But what's just so weird is I used to get a lot more of it. It's almost like there are half as many of you Samsung owners as there were 2 years ago. And he deleted his comment. It was. I've been pointing out, like, the whole linchpin of the Samsung fanboy and the Samsung Knights was this, like, marketing notion that somehow they were on the winning team. Xiaomi, last quarter, #1 smartphone producer. Galaxy S21, half as many sold as the Galaxy S10 2 years ago. And that 2-year window is precious territory because that's really where we start to see sales cycle. So many consumers are trying to go 3 to 4 years on a phone, but it's at 2 years that we really start seeing that tick over. So anyone who is Galaxy S9 is in prime territory for an upgrade. People on the S10 are starting to get into that upgrade, and S21 is not motivating people to part with their cash. And I called it at the beginning of the year. It is not a fun phone. It is demonstrably less phone than the phone it replaced. And even though it's cheaper, it doesn't feel like a great bargain when you're still in premium pricing territory. So I don't want to take anything away from people that like their S21s, but I'm talking about criticizing the business moves of a humongous corporation, and where I don't feel they're living up to this notion that they've built, this mindshare that they've built of being the market leader, the de facto standard of Android devices. There is so much competition that I genuinely feel if people looked at what features they cared about most, they could find a better fit for their specific needs with another product. And especially for consumers, if we're talking about average consumers, year over year, Samsung sales are up. They sold more phones. They sold more below the Galaxy S. The Galaxy A series is a ridiculous good buy right now. So when I criticize the S21 for CPU throttling and inconsistent performance and the way the GPU would just crash on some of my favorite games, I'd get those comments like, well, I don't do those kinds of things on my phone and I never lag or stutter. This guy's just a hater. And you're like, you just described usage that would be easily handled by a Pixel 3a. So why are you using an S21? Oh, I'm not shooting videos and editing and doing complicated games and all this stuff. Then go buy an A52. You'll be just as happy with the performance, you'll save money, and the phone will probably be even better for things like battery life. Why are we pretending that this was the real good big competitive phone? That's all just marketing. An A72 would rock the socks for what most people, average consumers, really need looking at a Galaxy S21. And the thing is, when we point that out, average consumers got it. They stopped listening to techies years ago. They're not coming to us to help inform their purchasing decisions. Average consumers are already buying average phones. It's techies who are continuing to pretend that the echo chamber of people who watch their videos are the people that are really out there buying and using this stuff. And that is a tiny niche minority of potential smartphone customers out there, smartphone consumers. So I was really proud of that burn. It's almost like there's half as many of you as there were 2 years ago. And he deleted his comment. It's so rare that you get just like such a stark victory like that on the internet. It felt good. It was me at my worst, like descending into the muck, being that much of a snarky git. I really don't like leaning into that, but it was just such the perfect comeback. And it eradicated just one of the most obnoxious comments that I've gotten on an article like this. But the reason why I think this is critical, buying at the premium tier for most people, I feel is an exercise in an emotional purchase. It's less, I'm practically weighing the pros and cons to arrive at the right purchasing decision for my needs, and more, hey, this is the new flashy, this is the new shiny, it's gonna make me feel good. And I think that's fine. I don't want to take anything away from someone who gets a thrill out of like owning an expensive bag or a nice pair of shoes, or, like especially as a hobbyist too, like if you're a sneakerhead, I don't get you. I don't get you at all. But go do you and have your most fun and live your best life. I just can't go along for that ride because I don't get it. So again, someone wants to buy $1,000 phone just to feel the feels of buying $1,000 phone. That's great. But Samsung is not inspiring people. The Galaxy S21 is not inspiring people to do that. So the Galaxy S increasingly feels like an afterthought. Galaxy Z Flip might pick up some of that slack. A Z Fold might replace the collection of people who were Note users. But those often feel like cynical moves, like, oh, Samsung's making the Galaxy S feel less exciting, and they killed the Galaxy Note. So I guess I'll buy a Z Flip, or I guess I need to buy a Z Fold if I want an S Pen, because I don't want to buy an S21 Ultra just to get a Note replacement where the stylus doesn't go in the phone. And I have to buy the stylus and case separately. That's lame. And what universe does that not feel like gouging compared to the Note 20 Ultra, which still outperforms a lot of our Galaxy S21s? So you kind of wrap up all of that psychology. And this is what I think is interesting is year over year, from 2020 to 2021, Apple also sold more phones in the first 6 months of 2021 than they did the same time period in 2020. 2020 was a real off year for everybody. But one of the most fascinating things to me is in selling more phones, Apple significantly pushed more consumers to buy Pros. So for the iPhone 11 era in 2020, it was almost a perfect three-way split. The iPhone 11, just by itself, made up roughly 30 to 32% of Apple's sales. One phone, right there, smack dab in the current mid-range. The iPhone 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max made up just a little bit less. So those two phones together almost caught the iPhone 11. And again, this is all by different shipping analyst market, as much as I can entangle this, because I've got to take data from one analyst and kind of compare it against another, and I never get just the dollars to donuts breakdown. But again, I'm looking at all of this. But then the last third of Apple's sales were all older phones. So even down all the way back down to the iPhone 8. So 30% of Apple's sales in 2020 were iPhone SE and older phones. A huge spread. iPhone XRs, iPhone 8, iPhone 8 Pro, iPhone SE. I mean, it's just this huge mix of different devices. Same time period in 2021, older phones only made up about a quarter of Apple sales. The iPhone 12 and 12 mini made up a little bit less than a quarter of iPhone sales, and everything else is iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max. The Galaxy S21 in the first 6 months inspired 20% less people than the Galaxy S20. Apple pushed so many more people up their food chain. So it's not as simple as like, well, people are being smarter with their purchases, and you gotta budget more, and it's the economy. No. First 6 months of 2021, Apple is inspiring a lot of people to move up the food chain, and Samsung is convincing people to move down the food chain. It's incredible. It's really fascinating to see like kind of the timeline on how these things kind of move and change, because I don't know that there's anything to suggest. You know, like I get a lot of people like, well, if Samsung hadn't gotten rid of the SD card slot. Again, I don't think anyone's rationally sitting down to consider their next purchase going, well, but that one doesn't have micro SD card expansion. I think it's so much more emotional than that. And then you kind of justify the purchase after the fact. Like you rationalize the purchase after you've spent the money. You want to feel good about the purchase, and I think your brain chemicals are kind of guiding you just as much as any frontal lobe consideration of that product. But right now, Samsung doesn't seem to be inspiring frontal lobes or the emotional chemical brain dumps to move up and spend more money. I'll be really curious to see. Samsung is about to, in a couple days, they're going to do their unpack. Was it the 11th? I think it's August 11. They're gonna drop their new folding phones. There's going to be a Z Fold 3, Z Flip 3, whatever we're going to be calling these things. I'm putting out the prediction here. In 2020, Samsung estimated that they were going to move like 4 million. Was it 4 or 5? Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They were going to move 4 million folding phones. They ultimately arrived at about 2.5, which is pretty good, all things considered. Now, in their sort of conference calls and their quarterlies, they're estimating that they're going to move 6 million folding phones in 2021. I feel a good chunk of those are really going to be Z Fold 2s on sale. Like when you see, Samsung sold 6 million folding phones. I don't think they're going to sell 6 million Z Fold 3s and Z Flips, Z Flip 2s or Z Flip 5Gs. I think that 6 million number over 2021 is mostly going to be made up of Z Fold 2s at like significant price savings, at significant price cuts. Like what, you can pick up a Z Fold 2 now for $999. You know, it started out as an almost $2,000 phone. So that to me is going to be the trick. Like I want to see how many Z Fold 3s they sell. I want to see how many Z Flips of 2021. I think it's going to be called Z Flip 3. Because I don't think they're going to make up the difference of waning interest on the Galaxy S and completely missing the Note. So let's just say, will current year 2021 folding phones make up the difference in lost Galaxy S21 sales? I mean, I'm going to put it out there. I don't think they will. Let alone, I don't think folding phones will make up the difference from 2020 to 2021 for Galaxy S sales and make up the difference for losing the Note in 2021. The Note is a much smaller community of smartphone purchasers, but that still racked up millions of sales. And I don't think those two combined are gonna be satisfied with the folding phone market. So what say I'm gonna see some comments down here. Do you think folding phones will make up Galaxy S sales and the absence of the Note? Hit me with some thoughts. Hit me with some hot takes. I really want the hot takes. I don't want the cold takes. Cold takes are no fun. From Gabaletta, if the stylus doesn't come inside the device, I don't want it. My only caveat is their tablet line, and even then, those used to have the S Pen inside the tablet. I think I have still like one of the OG Note 8s. It was before the Note 8. It was the Note 8, an 8-inch tablet, so big for the bezels. I liked what LG did. LG can't afford to have 3 versions of the same phone, and it didn't increase the price of the phone. In fact, the V60 was cheaper than the V50 it replaced, and you had to make a few compromises like screen resolution. The telephoto camera sensor really wasn't much of a compromise, but then you could add a stylus, and I still do. Oh, by the way, if you cared, V60 just got updated to the July security patch. So V60 is now one of the most current security patch phones in my collection today. That's hilarious. But I still do almost all of my document work on the V60. I love how they did that stylus. My problem with Samsung is you have to get an S21 Ultra, which is already significantly more expensive than most other phones. And then you need to buy an S Pen. And if you want to keep that S Pen with you, you also need to buy a very proprietary case. So if I bought a V60, a dual display case, a stylus, and a memory card, that was the same price as a base model Galaxy S20. I feel like that was a fine price compromise to make for way more stuff. Yeah, see, Aditya, I think a lot of people are kind of shopping this stuff out. I actually wasted 6 months looking at phones with a set of compromises I can live with. It's not easy right now. Right now, my SIM card is back in my OnePlus 9 Pro, but it's been almost split even between the OnePlus 9 Pro and my V60. There's just so much that the V60 did right last year. And in current day, it's still an incredible workhorse phone. If you're on a Note 20 Ultra, I think you're doing better than most of the Galaxy S21 stuff out there. And going back to the little S10e, this is such a good phone. I mean, the LG G8 is objectively better, but it's so tough. I mean, the devices that we've got all kind of highlighting different pros and cons. It makes me crazy when we pretend that there's some kind of like real winner in this space. And it's obviously, consumers are speaking and they're voting with their wallets. It's definitely not the S21. From TK Bay, the Samsung Galaxy Flip and Fold will be great. I hope so. I mean, again, we're going to have to see how Samsung cuts pricing on those, because that's going to be another thing, is they want to make these things cheaper. So hopefully that works out for them too. But I also feel like something tells me the Z Fold is still going to have the same issues, being two full phones like sandwiched into one big thick lump, aspect ratio screens that are kind of more difficult to use than they really need to be. I don't know. It's tricky stuff. Skip this year's phones, upgrade, and grab a Steam Deck. Even if it doesn't live up to the hype, I don't trust those DRM and anti-cheat vendors. It will be one heck of a gadget. From Paco Stin. Yeah, I'm actively looking at cutting another phone out of my end of year coverage, which it might be a Samsung. Maybe I just won't review any Samsung at the end of 2021. But I'm looking at like keeping the budget healthy for my pre-order on a Steam Deck, because I really want to get one of those. Here, let me scroll back down. Simon says, Hypno, no, Samsung are on a downer. And see, this I kind of get. From Dave Burns, says, a lot of the girls I know love the clamshell look to the Z Flip. Z Flip, I mean, Samsung wasn't wrong. It's not a powerhouse device. It's not an enthusiast device. It's a statement phone. And there is something conceptually mega cool about having a phone that takes up space like a makeup compact. I mean, as a dude who occasionally wears pants that fit, I kind of want the idea of that to also succeed. Something tells me that's going to be Apple's first foray into folding phones. It's not going to be a tablet because they don't want to upset iPad sales. I bet you Apple will do the clamshell normal phone. So that way the iPhone is still an iPhone, but it can fold in half and take up less space in your pocket. That way they don't have to worry about iPhone cannibalizing any of their iPad sales. I bet you, I'm willing to put good money down that that's what they're going to do. TK Bay is saying, I'm responding to my actual question. No way, Juan, the folding phone market is even smaller than the Note series market. And I don't think, I agree, I don't think they're going to make up that difference. From Steve, Q3 Becker, I don't give a darn about folding devices until it can actually be as durable as a slab of glass. I think that's still going to be a concern, and I'm really anxious to see. You know, so even for a slab of glass, we've been seeing reports that Galaxy S20 screens are failing at, are failing at an upsettingly high rate. Getting a screen right on a glass slab is not a foregone conclusion. And I'm really anxious to see what this implementation might be if Samsung is going to have stylus support on the Z Fold. Fine point pressure onto a plastic display sounds like a pretty bad idea to me in the long run, especially on a device that's likely going to sell for well over $1,000. From Gormlord, I don't know if the price is going to drop at all, but if it did, I think that would make a big dent. Potentially. Again, I feel like Z Folds really started moving when they did the, how long was it? You could keep the Z Fold for like a month before you had to decide if you wanted to return it. And, you know, they cut the price in half. Well, just like I was saying with the Duo, like, why are we giving Samsung this special consideration where huge price cuts come weeks after their phones launch. Like the Galaxy S21s went on sale 3 weeks after the product launch. If you pre-ordered, if you were a Samsung diehard, if you wanted to be right in line, first in line, you got punished. Samsung fans got hit with the higher pricing. You only had to wait 3 weeks before that price dropped and they went on significant sales. I doubt that's going to happen with the Z Fold and the Z Flip. But again, 6 months in, we get into 2022 and then there's another, well, you can get your Z Fold for half price and keep it for 3 months before you need to send it back. Well, obviously then they're going to sell better. That's a no-brainer. Oh, and King Turtle, I completely agree. I'd be happy with Samsung making the stylus a separate purchase as long as some Galaxy A series phones can utilize it too. I think it's almost criminal that we haven't seen a Galaxy A series with stylus support. Like, I think it's a big goof. And again, I had stylus support on the LG Velvet. The Velvet was just a monster feature phone. Desktop mode, dual display, a really good headphone jack, even if it wasn't quad DAC, SD card, stylus support. I mean, there is no one phone that can tick all the boxes like a Velvet. The only thing it's missing is like an IR blaster and a removable battery. I mean, it's just insane how good that phone was. So Simon says Hypno is kind of replying back and forth with Gary the Fireman, but also said, and if Pixel 6 Pro XL is super expensive, I may go Surface Duo. I'm still very positive on Pixel 6 Pro. I think Google has every right to sell a premium tier product because they offer a unique experience. And I think, you want to pay for a very specific flavor of owning a smartphone, not whatever has the same processor and you can get for the cheapest. I think they've proven most consumers should be shopping the A series. A Pixel 4a or a 4a 5G is a stonking good bargain even today. So the minority of smartphone consumers out there should be shopping at the premium tier, so don't water those down. Don't make your Galaxy S21 competitor more like an FE or a Galaxy A series. If I buy a Galaxy S, I should expect premium tier. And that's not what I feel you get on the S21. Oh, from Trey. I still think the Razr 2 was better than the Sammy. More impressive as a statement phone, IMO. I still pull out my Razr 2 from time to time. It is such fun hardware. It really is great. Yeah, I think it's such a shame that we got great engineering on that phone and then we never got a follow-up. The Razr 2 is just an absolute monster. Simon says, Hypno, putting a plastic screen on a Snapdragon 888 is a bad idea. Hashtag melted screen. I don't think it's going to get that hot. I think if the 888 were melting AMOLEDs, we'd probably see it in other applications. Because right now it seems like the screen issues that Samsung are facing, Galaxy S9s had a lot of screen tint, green tint and gray, black crush. S10s had some, but the S20s seem to be failing. I haven't heard anything yet on the S21s failing, so I don't know if the A88's really running that hot. So, just kind of scrolling through the rest of these, but it doesn't seem like anyone here seems to think that folding phones are going to make up the difference. So again, I'm anxious. I'm curious. I want to see what happens here. Samsung's going to make a lot of noise. We're going to see a deluge of advertising. As soon as Unpacked goes live, we're going to have all of the major tech YouTube channels putting out their first look embargo, full review videos under embargo, but not really. And they'll capitalize all of that market. By the time I'd be able to get my hands on a Z Fold 3, it is absolutely not worth the price of buying it and trying to review it. So I'm really anxious about how I'm going to work that into my coverage. And I might not. I might just save whatever cash I can for buying a bunch of games on Steam with my Steam Deck. Or maybe just slumming it and hoping that like a Duo 2 is good. Because I'm really anxious about the Duo 2 also if they put a big old camera bulge on the back. So, I want to wrap this show up. We're already running a little over. And I wanted to do something kind of fun. Because there are 44 people watching right now. We've been keeping a pretty consistent stream. If Trey916, if you're still in the chat, I just need you to kind of pop up or say hey or something like that. I'm calling you out by name, Trey. So what you didn't know that I was doing was I was kind of going through my comments. I was kind of putting people into a list, and I just hit a random number generator, and the Trey's name came up. So when Eco sent me the gems, these are the O1HS. These are $200 in-ear monitor earbuds. They sent me 2. So I've got this box over here, and it's unwrapped because I needed to make sure, like what they sent me, but it's unopened beyond me just looking inside the box. So Trey, if you're still here, if you can hear my voice, pop up. But I can stalk you on Twitter. You were picked, so I've got $200 in-ear monitors from Eco ready to go to hook you up with some good audio. Now, these are really hard to use for Apple lossless on an iPhone, so you might need to get a DAC or something. So I apologize if that's something that you'll need to pick up. But yeah, sneaky giveaway, because I really genuinely dug the sound tuning on these, and I just thought this would be kind of fun to hook someone up. I was seriously considering like giving this to I've got an uncle that's kind of into audio tech too, but I thought, you know what, why not just do this here for the live stream. So Trey, because I don't see Trey in the chat, I'll reach out to Trey on the I think I can hit him up on Twitter. I'll send him like a time code link to this part of the stream. But I want to try and do a little bit more of that, and I might try and do that with some phones coming up soon too, but I don't want to make a big deal out of this is going to be the stream where we give things away, because I don't want people coming here just to be annoying and try and hook up contests. This crew in here, y'all my buddies. So please spread the word, try and bring more people that you feel will be like-minded and will enjoy these kinds of gadget and tech and politics conversations, but this is just for y'all. I'm always on the lookout for how can I reward those who have already participated, not how can I get you to spam Twitter to hopefully win something for an upcoming contest. So Trey, congratulations. Hopefully you like them, and if you don't, they're $200 earbuds, so like sell them and get something that you like. Or spread the love and pass them along to someone who else also might. Oh yeah, of course, Trey's also on the Discord. I can hit him up on the Discord. If someone already hasn't alerted him on the Discord. From Gary the Fireman, this is by far the best way to do a giveaway. I agree. I really like doing stuff like this. So I feel like that's the right place to wrap all this up. Like I said, some pretty heavy conversations. I guess, I mean, like the common theme, the last point I always hope to make is this stuff is exhausting, and every time we get complacent or we lose one of these small fights, we take a step back. It is always a part of this to say we have to keep participating. There's never an end game where we win and then we're just good. When we see economic forces at play, when we see marketing forces at play, when we see political forces at play, especially for those of us in a conversation like this now, in a live stream like this now, it's up to us
to continue to be a part of that conversation and to hopefully be good resources for those who might not be in it as deep as we are. So I greatly appreciate those of you who are along for this ride. It means the world to me to have people in here, and even when we disagree, that we're coming to these types of platforms to share information and contribute to a conversation and work some of this stuff out back and forth. I feel like my opinions on these have been so much better informed for having hosted these types of streams and having my ideas challenged. It's not to have a fight and then win on the internet. It's to really reinforce, do I know what the F I'm talking about, and can I back that up? So it's not just my feelings versus your feelings. And from there, trying to be a resource where I can spread better information. So y'all are a part of that. And y'all are really good at it. So I appreciate that. It helps me be better. So I hope it's at least somewhat entertaining to watch my evolution play out in real time. Simon says it. No, you're wrong there, Juan. Oh no, don't make me that. Oh, Dave Burns says some gadget guy owns Gadget Nerds with facts and logic. Oh no. Gadget facts don't care about your gadget feelings. So Aditya, Gormlord, Gabaletta, Simon says Hypno, Gary the Fireman, Dave Burns, Goran, Tech Potato, everyone in this chat right now. I dig y'all. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much, watching, sharing, subscribing. A huge thank you to TK Bay for hooking up some tier 1 subs. That was incredible, and just again, thank you so much for supporting the production, supporting the subreddit, bringing more people to share and contribute, elevating voices, broadening our community, bringing more points of view so that we can hash out some of this stuff. Folks, I want you to have an amazing week with your technology. I want you to do awesome with your tech. I want you to be awesome with your tech. And I'll catch you all back here next week for another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. Be safe. Take care. Have some fun. I'll catch you back. I love you all.